Gay men sexually assault women constantly. The origin story of where this allegation came from. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and if any gay guy in the current year still hasn't gotten the memo, it's become completely accepted narrative within feminist circles that gay men are lecherous, patriarchal predators who exert our masculine dominance over women by regularly fondling them, and even if you are naive and you don't think so, a huge percentage of your feminist-identified female friends probably swear that this is true, and their boyfriends probably do too. Though, of course, likely not when you are actually around, because they also know that this rumor is a fabrication that you'd object to. I was recently talking to a group of gay men about the relentless anti-gay and downright homophobic sentiments that feminists hurl very regularly towards the gay male community. And while literally all of the other gay guys had heard the feminist allegation that gay men constantly grab women, there was one fanatical gay male feminist that pretended that he had never heard a feminist make this claim and acted like I was being absurd by even mentioning it, and said that it's probably just fringy radicals. Now, of course, the idea that gay men are constantly sexually assaulting women is, in fact, completely ludicrous, and so I assume that for the most part, feminists would be perfectly happy not to let the vast majority of gay men know that they've been very actively and deliberately spreading this untrue rumor about us, because they usually still want us to like them. And yet, on account of the fact that feminism is ultimately mainly a political ideology, and they are mostly trying to convince heterosexual women and straight men alike that gay men too are affected by this imaginary societal sickness known as patriarchy, they needed an excuse to nix the inconvenience of non-feminist gay men from the equation, because once even men who love other men start drinking the Kool-Aid and playing along with patriarchy theory, things would be easier for full-scale feminist takeover of the West, as there won't be any men left to say, "I don't live all day to oppress women. I fancy men anyhow." Thus, being that feminists essentially own the LGBT community, which still includes gay men within it for some odd reason, and being that feminists grew a bit overconfident in their persuasive abilities back around 2014 or so, when everybody was afraid of them, they began their aggressive push towards a take-no-prisoners, hostile takeover of the gay male community, starting with this article from Jezebel. Now, I mentioned that things started with this article on Jezebel because it's true in the context of fourth wave intersectional feminism, which is the particularly homophobic and aggressive strain of feminism that we are dealing with in the current year that is powered mainly by blogs and social media. However, the demonization of gay men from feminists has been around probably since the 1960s, but certainly no later than the 1970s. And if you want to learn more about the roots of where it came from, I suggest reading the book The New Gay Liberation by Matthew Lai, which you can buy for pretty cheap on Kindle and takes only a few hours or so to read. Long story short, feminist theory has always held a special, unique, and rather confusing hatred for gay men in its heart, and you don't have to search for some supposedly wacky, fringy, radical feminists to find it. Even Bell Hooks, who has been given saint-like status among supposedly progressive, intersectional feminists, speaks very negatively about gay men on numerous occasions in the book The Will to Change, which basically reads like a novella-length diary entry about why exactly feminists need to evangelize men into the feminist religion. That said, I shouldn't bore you by trying to rehash how exactly feminists came to the conclusion that gay men are no better, if not maybe even far worse, than straight men, but some feminists certainly have made that claim over and over and over, and they are by no means fringy and radical, unless you think that Bell Hooks isn't very well respected among feminists. Bell Hooks, who non-ironically quotes Andrea Dworkin in that very book. Regardless, I don't want to recap feminist theory because what I'm trying to illustrate is how exactly this notion that gay men are sexual predators who want to molest women entered into contemporary pop cultural discourse, where it lingers very openly and non-apologetically, while the gay male establishment absolutely will not defend itself against this homophobic and damaging allegation, and often even directly perpetuates the myth themselves on their own media platforms, having gay male feminists repeat the lie. Like I said, it largely started with some anecdotal allegations from one wacky Jezebel contributor who was a gay male feminist, who claimed that he frequently witnessed gay men touching women's bodies, and when the women would complain, the guys would dismiss their discomfort and say, "I can do this because I'm gay." Which is something that I've literally never witnessed in all of my personal anecdotes of over 15 years of going to gay bars, and I was probably quite a lot more popular than the guy who wrote the article because he sounds like he has issues, but it didn't take long before he wasn't alone and other guys started writing articles or making videos like these.
And let's say you love seeing straight girls at the bar. That's awesome, but remember that being a gay man doesn't mean you get to touch women without consent. Even if the intent isn't sexual, the idea that men are entitled to women's bodies is misogynist.
Still, initially they didn't usually just come right out and say, "Gay men sexually assault women all the time." Because I imagine that if they were to do that, there would have been a bit more resistance. Instead, they started slow with a few completely non-believable anecdotes, like the ones in that article, and apparently a lot of people swallowed it, remembering the casually playful environment that gay bars tend to be, and how it's conceivably believable that gay men regularly also completely non-consensually touch women once they've had a few drinks, as opposed to just touching other men. Then, after they had already begun crafting the untrue narrative that gay men regularly grope women by stating it on numerous blogs and videos, with basically non-existent pushback from literally anybody notable in the left, they started using their subtle mind tricks of persuasion. More and more articles like these came out, starting to slowly feed the actual feminist theory that I spoke of earlier into gay men's subconscious on places like the oh-so-fringy Huffington Post, where they basically tried to use a sleight of hand to start getting gay men to view the world not in the way that they actually see it, but through the warped feminist lens. I'll read a particularly telling paragraph. It's complex when we consider the interplay of misogyny and sexual assault within gay male communities. It's confusing to imagine that our internalized misogyny is enforcing sexual predation, but it's difficult to disentangle the two phenomena. Men's entitlement to spaces and bodies and our silence in having these conversations is both consequence and fuel to a taut masculinity which bolsters male violence. Moving forward, we need to be more aware of our identity's complexity. We need not forget that we've been brought up in a system that enforces a binary on behaviors, roles, and expectations. We call this gender. We need to acknowledge the consequence of growing up male. It's rather tragic to read from a man with such deep shame, though it should be of note that earlier in the article, he recounts a story that sounds as if he might have lost his virginity while being the victim of a violent date rape. So perhaps the feminist victim lens was a way for him to reconcile this trauma with himself, hoping that maybe with enough feminism, he and others like him will never be the victims of horny men again. Regardless, after people had already been repeatedly bludgeoned over the head with the allegation that gay men are serial booby gropers, and inundated with feminist theory texts similar to the one that I just read, and for whatever reason the gay press was perfectly fine with this, it then became possible to take it a step further.
While discussing this video, I had an overwhelming amount of women and DFAB people on social media approach me and tell me about the numerous times that they were groped or sexually assaulted by gay men.
That's Kat Black, and while she basically didn't upload at all for about 5 months and hasn't been talked about much recently, she actually has over 130,000 subscribers on YouTube and was well respected and once got a lot of attention from fourth wave feminists. No, she is not just some fringy radical. And of course, you have this article, which is my all-time favorite, because it just comes right out and discredits itself as the only real justification for claiming that gay men frequently grope women is that this woman allegedly had her vagina groped by a man in the restroom at a gay bar who claimed that he was gay, as if it never occurred to her that he was lying about being homosexual. That all said, yes, this allegation is around. It's common, it's calculated, and most importantly, it's widely believed by people who bother to take feminists seriously, and of course, by many feminists themselves. It's not just radicals, it's not just fringy wackos, but it is both the feminist establishment and even the LGBT establishment that is making this obviously ridiculously untrue allegation that we frequently touch women instead of women frequently touching us. The only real time that I ever saw literally any gay man publish any pushback against this relentless bad-mouthing of gay men in the leftist press was this article published on the Huffington Post. But even at the top of that very article, which was supposed to be criticizing the initial Jezebel article that I talked about earlier, he confirms that according to him, it's actually a good point to bring up that some gay men feel entitled to touching women's bodies. Who? I just haven't ever experienced that. No, sorry. I feel like if a gay guy ever felt entitled and a woman got mad, he would apologize. I can't see it. Sorry. That all said, if you are a gay man that somehow pretends to yourself that feminists want what is best for gay men instead of simply wanting what they think is best for themselves, and you don't believe that they are willing to start lying about men and even the gay male community to get what they think that they want, and you are willing to say that you think that it's only a few bad apple feminists who say this stuff about gay men, well, I hope this video clears a few things up. No, it's not the radicals who have misinterpreted the text who have the problem. It's the source material and the establishment that means us harm, which you can read for yourself in the books I have mentioned. The problem is the feminist theory itself. All the media it controls, which is most media, and everyone who understands it. It's not the ones who get it wrong that we have to worry about. It's the ones that get it right.